Okay, guys, I'm back. Sorry. Thank you for your patience, guys. Let me just wait for y'all to file. Hello. Hey there. Can you hear me and see me? Is everything working well? Right now I'm on mobile data instead of Wi-Fi. Good to see you guys are back. Maybe the bandwidth has gone down a little bit. Is it a little bit, audio is clear, but is the visual maybe not as decent? Okay. So, thank you. Okay, yeah, no problem. It's usable. What I'll do is we'll type in the answers into the chat so that we have the typed information there, even if I can't necessarily use the board as well as I sometimes would. Okay, little blurry, but we're good to go. So what question were we on? I'm going to find that. All right, we were at the question modus tollens, and I think, so the first part of our lecture today is still on the channel. It didn't get deleted, which is good. That means that we'll be able to preserve all that content all the way up until modus ponens. Now we're just picking up part 2 with a little reconnection to the lecture. It won't drop out again because we're on mobile data hotspot instead of Wi-Fi. That does affect the picture quality a little bit, I guess, but it's functional, so good to go. And sorry for the interruption. There's nothing I can do about that. Things happen sometimes. I guess we've had a good run of luck for most of the semester, but a couple times we've had to switch to mobile data. All right, guys, cool. Maybe I could just ask about modus tollens. I know you gave a good example of it, Devin, and it was funny about my internet, but put it in the chat again so that it, well, I guess you already did in the previous part, so let's go ahead. Modus tollens, though, is, it's like this. Modus tollens. If A, then B, then we have not B, so not A. I have to type these comments on my phone right now of part of the interface little issues. So that's why you might see me using it when I have to type things in. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead to the next, if we may. Thank you guys for your patience. I'm asking you about chain argument, okay? So simply tell me, what is a form of a chain argument? And if we could perhaps add an example to the list, that'd be good too. No, I'm not. Thanks, though. It's funny. You know, I actually set a new high score in Tetris. I haven't talked to you guys about that at all, but I surpassed my old like top 10 of the world score like a month ago. But anyway, question, chain argument. Tell me what you know. Yeah, on the NES. Okay, thanks, Devin. If A, then B. If B, then C. Well, if C, then D, and then therefore if A, then D. But you know what? The problem is, Devin, with the way you wrote it, a couple issues. Number one, there's no way that we can tell what the conclusion is or what one premise starts or when the next one stops or whatever. Also, here's another thing. You added a third premise, which is optional but not necessary. The core example would be just 2 premises here. So if maybe you want to try and rewrite it just one time and you can number the premises and then also put like C for conclusion so that we know where each part stands. And maybe let's just limit it to 2 premises because although 3 is fair and valid, I don't want to necessarily burden people with having to remember 3 steps rather than 2 if they just want to give like a base example. So go ahead and let's get that form one more time in the chat. Yeah, I still have the real NES. It's kind of a complex rig to set it up on these new TVs, but I have the original Nintendo Entertainment System and yeah, the old rectangle controller. Chain argument. Devin, you're 90% there. I just wanted you to kind of streamline the way you wrote it. Or if you don't want to do it, then anybody else here could also do it. But let's keep moving because if we get stalled, then that doesn't help us. Devin, good example, but the problem is I'm still asking for the form. The A's, B's, C's, and D's and all that. So may we please write it? Okay. Thank you, Paul. If A, then B. If B, then C. And therefore, No, you got it wrong though also. No one's writing this thing correctly. Paul, that's not the conclusion. That's not the conclusion, Paul. Try it again. It's not the conclusion. You're not writing it right. Let's get it correctly written in the chat, because if we have an incorrect form, then it's going to throw people off. Wait, I'm sorry. Why do you say you don't need to assert the if? You do. Just write the whole thing one time in the correct way. The whole thing in one comment. If A, then B. If B, then C. So therefore, if A, then C. Correct. Simple. If, then. It's a conditional. They're all conditionals in a chain argument. So you start with an if, then. The next thing's an if, then. And then it's if, then, all the way, top to bottom. There's no single sentence in a chain argument where it says A, and it just doesn't say the word if before it. Okay? So, good. Thank you, Con and Paul. Now, Devin, your examples above. Let's look at those. It just says, if Joe Biden campaigns in states, then he'll win enough electoral votes. That's like your A to B. If Biden wins enough electoral votes, then he'll win the election. That's like your B to C. And you keep going. If Biden wins the election, then he'll be president. That's C to D. A, B, B, C, C, D. And so therefore, the conclusion you've given is connecting the beginning with the end. If he campaigns in states, then he'll be president. Fair enough. Valid argument. Whether it's sound or not to be questioned for the moment. Just want to get the form out there. Okay, good. So chain arguments are like a chain reaction of events that one leads to the next. And then the summary is that the beginning step will lead to the final step. So if I study, then I'll pass my class. If I pass my class, I'll graduate. If I graduate, then I will take a position at this company. So if I study, then I'll take that position, whatever, stuff like that. Okay, so chain argument's brutal. Maybe it's a little bit weird, but just follow the form and you should be good to go. Okay, now I want to ask, what is the standard form of an argument? So visually now, tell me how these logical arguments are supposed to be displayed on the page or on the screen. Where do the parts go? How do they stand in relation to each other? Now we're just talking about the presentation of it in the written or typed form. So what goes where? Stuff like that. Tell me standard form. Okay, thanks, Devin. We can see the board behind me, but it's also kind of blurry. So yeah, let's get the information in the chats. Correct, Devin. The conclusion is at bottom. It's below, like you see here. And if you can see it, right? So conclusion is below, divided by a horizontal line, and the premises are above. Now it's important also to remember this. With the premises, they have to be listed, not all running continuously on the same horizontal line. So like when one premise sentence finishes, you basically have to just hit the return key or something and jump down to the next available line below it. Like you see it here, the premises are numbered, and that's, I think, a helpful way to remember to always do this. Strictly speaking, they don't need to be numbered, but if you number the premises, that helps you to remember that they're supposed to be listed in a vertical ordering rather than in a horizontal, like just, prose writing. Okay, good. So, well, numbering is a good thing. It's a standard that I usually go with, but I don't penalize those that don't because it's not 100% done in every case. Nonetheless, I think it's a useful visual aid. Okay, so we now are going on to chapter 1. We've talked about all the interesting information at the beginning of the class dealing with just argument, logic, what's deduction, induction, types of arguments, types of sentences, truth, etc. So now chapter 1 is the next section of notes. That has a lot to do with different social psychology experiments, qualities that good critical thinkers have, stages of cognitive development, barriers, and obstacles to critical thinking. So there's these two famous social psychology experiments. I know right now you're just in the review, so you don't want to maybe take the time to write as much as you might write on the final, but can you just give me the basic general idea or gist of the Milgram study? Which one was that? What were they trying to examine? What were the final results that they discovered? Even a few words, keywords, and terms from Milgram. Which one was Milgram? Okay, Devin. Milgram experiment showed to what extent people will follow authority even when the instruction is contrary to their beliefs. 2 subjects, 1 teacher, 1 learner. Right, pretty much. To fill in extra details, you would say, for example, that they were directing the teacher to give shocks to the learner whenever they thought they were getting an answer wrong on memorization. And they were supposed to increase the intensity and voltage of each new shock. There were no real shocks being administered. Nonetheless, the teacher thought that they were. And what we were looking at is how many people are going to obey these weird, messed up instructions, and how many people are just going to listen to their conscience and refuse to do it. And psychologists at the time thought that there'd be barely anybody that would go all the way. But somewhat disappointingly, I don't know how you would put it, but to our dismay, it was fully 2/3 or more of the people that gave all the shocks. Some showed discomfort, but many people, the majority, gave them all. To those that didn't, though, they did display good critical thinking skills because they showed the ability to make reasonable arguments as to why they thought it was not proper. Okay, so good. I think what you said here, Devin, is in line with all of that, and I just kind of wanted to say it in one way there. Next, Zimbardo, Philip Zimbardo study. Can anyone say what was the Zimbardo one? So we've talked about the fake electric shocks. That's Milgram. They underestimated American exceptionalism. I don't know. Is something that's found in human nature? Do you think they wouldn't have seen the same thing in Europe, or that they wouldn't have seen the same thing in other countries? I don't know. That's a question to wonder about. But outside the scope of what I need you to think about for this particular answer. At the same time, let's ask about Zimbardo. Which one was this? There's like 3 main experiments that we've talked about in our whole semester. There's like Milgram, Zimbardo, and then later on Ash. So it's important to just remember those different ones that we've talked about. You seem to know about Milgram, but what is the Zimbardo one? You're still with me, right? We're all together? I'm not seeing a lot of answers coming back, so making sure there's no problem with the stream. Camera's working and everything. You can hear my question. Okay, good. There you go. Thanks, Devin. So hope we all remember this, though. It's not that far in the past. Zimbardo, guys, it's was the Stanford prison experiment. Okay, so they made a simulated prison environment at Stanford University in the basement of the psychology department back in the 70s. And they basically wanted to study how people would act when they were put in a social scenario where some people had like total control and others had none, and where there were like loose guidelines issued in terms of how to administer their authority. And it was supposed to run for 2 weeks, but it was shut down after 6 days because of the evident harm psychologically and otherwise that was being imposed on the prisoners by the guards. And so it kind of showed Zimbardo and others that when you're placed in a power dynamic like that and you are not given clear directives, many people will fall back on like weird intellectual habits and poor behavior. Good critical thinking, the argument goes, helps guard against the tendency to not think about what you're doing or whether it's right. Okay, so then we had the stages of cognitive development. I believe it was William Perry Jr. that talked about those stages. He thought that a human being intellectually develops throughout life in a series of 3 stages, pretty much. Cognitive development in the first place is the lifelong process of acquiring intelligence, problem-solving abilities. But what were the stages? If you could even just name them. And Noah, what have you said? Experiment to test the extent people will use their authority, prison guards and prisoners. That's funny. Oh. Okay, whatever though. Whatever, Noah. You're going to be fine one way or the other. But are you attending to the question I'm asking here, which is just the stages of cognitive development? Sometimes, it's hard. The context can get lost when all we can do is interact in these sort of, in electronic forums and stuff. But anyway, yeah, Devin, dualism, relativism, commitment. Yes, dualism, relativism, commitment, and that's the full definition spelled out there in Devin's comments. At the dualist phase, early stage of intellectual development, you think the answers are all out there and authority figures just know them, so I should just listen to these presumed authority figures. I don't have to think for myself. They know it all. And truth is just black and white. There's just hard and fast facts that all the authorities know. At the second stage, you think truth is just all opinion-based. There's no objective facts, so we should just respect everyone's valid, equal opinions because none of them are better or worse than any others. Then you get to commitment where you actually do commit to your own views, but you try to base it on best available evidence and whatever your good common sense and reason can imply. So 3 stages: dualism, relativism, commitment. It's kind of like a process of moving towards understanding that there's a variety of perspectives, but then also being able to commit yourself to the one you think is really true based on reasonable evidence and judgment. Then confirmation bias. What is confirmation bias? It's a type of bias It's when a person only does a certain thing. So only seeking information that supports your self-held beliefs. One way to put it, sure. So it's when a person only seeks info and whatever that supports their already established views. So like if you thought that, I don't know, Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK, as you know the official story claims, then you'd be the sort of person that would only look at information that boosted that alternative explanation, and you would never consider, I don't know, like the other official sources and whatever. I'm not trying to say like what my own view is or isn't. I haven't really thought much about this, but the point is that if you have confirmation bias, it's kind of like the type of person that will go down a rabbit hole only looking at information that supports a given view that they're already committed to, instead of allowing themselves to be exposed to criticism, objections, and differences of opinion. Okay, so Noah, the way you put it, when an opinion is deemed as a fact because multiple people who have the same opinion also deem it as a fact, sort of, but it has more to do with like shielding yourself from not friendly information, information that does not seem to imply that you're correct or that your already settled views are correct. So yeah, confirmation bias. It's a bias in favor of confirming what you already think is true. You have to at least be willing to take into account other viewpoints and other evidence. And so if you have confirmation bias, you're kind of closed to those other things. All right, so we go on. There are now qualities of a good critical thinker. In the study guide, I kind of condensed a number of these qualities down into just one question on the list. So I can just run through some of them kind of quickly because I don't want to spend too much time on just one question, but a few words about them, and you'll see this also back in the notes in the book and in our earlier lectures. So analytical skills. This is the ability to provide logical support for your beliefs instead of just having baseless, unfounded opinions. So like having something that you could say that would be reasonable if a person was to question you why you think that's true. Next, effective communication, which has a couple of elements. First of all, being able to speak and write well, but also being able to listen carefully to other people, since communication involves listening, not just expressing yourself. And then also knowing about different communication styles that people have, which we've talked about. Inquiry skills, knowing how to find information for the purposes of research and how to put it together and compile it. Then you have flexibility. This is the intellectual kind of flexibility, which means being willing and able to change your mind or your plans when it's appropriate, when it's called for, instead of just always doubling down on the things you think are true. And being inflexible, like in that sense. Then, open-minded skepticism. So the open-minded part is that, well, let me talk about the skeptical part first, actually. So in the skeptical sense, the open-minded skeptic would not believe something unless it could be somehow proven beyond some level of doubt. So, if you're skeptical, then you're not gullible and you're not just given easily to beliefs. You believe things, but you have to have good, solid evidence to feel like it's worthy of your belief. So that's the skeptical part. On the other hand, though, an open-minded skeptic does keep an open mind to all different views unless and until the matter is settled by evidence. So like if you're the juror and you're an open-minded skeptic, you're not going to say what your view is concerning the case until all the evidence has been given. But and whatever conclusion that you do reach is going to have to be based on supported evidence. Okay, next we have method of doubt. Method of doubt is something that was discussed by a French philosopher named Descartes back in the 1600s. His famous book, The Meditations, was an exploration of doubt and what he thought we could figure out for certain. And he says, use this method to figure out what's certain. The method of doubt says to assume to be false, what? Can I ask you that? Can you just finish that little thought? The method of doubt says, go ahead and assume to be false anything and everything that could what? Sorry, I know you don't like cracking knuckles. I remember that, Paul. But anyway, what is it when you have a method of doubt? You're going to assume to be false any and all things that blank. What's that last part? Yeah, method of doubt. There you go. Thanks, Devin. It's to assume to be false anything that could possibly be doubted. So if it's even like a little iota of possibility of doubt, we would pretend, or at least for the sake of argument, assume it false until we can see something that's not capable of being doubted. Descartes' method of doubt goes to extremes. I mean, he says, do you really know that even this is real? Are you dreaming right now? Maybe this isn't even real. Maybe this is all just fake. Most of us, I don't think, would take doubt and skepticism to those heights. But it is, I think, a healthy thing in general to be a little bit more of a skeptical person than to just believe everything that you see or hear or read. So get good evidence before you believe things. Don't just believe things casually or for no good reason. Next, there's collaborative learning. Not to worry, Jonah, but you'll find it in a lecture that we gave on Chapter 1. If you refer back to the dates in the calendar and you see the Chapter 1 listed dates, I guarantee you'll see it, I think, in maybe the first or second lecture on Chapter 1. But good, thanks, Devin. You have the dates of Descartes, 1596 to 1650, wrote Meditations in 1641. Yes, all correct information. Okay, so then anyways, I'm asking, well, I'll say a few more things. Collaborative learning, another quality of a good critical thinker. That's the ability to work well with other people cooperatively instead of just doing everything unilaterally and not taking anyone else's advice or input. So working well with others to find shared solutions to common problems. Next, we have creative problem solving, and I guess that was the last one that we had in that section. This is just the ability to come up with imaginative solutions to complex problems. Sometimes that means that you come up with these contingency plans in advance. In other cases, you're just able to quickly assess what needs to be done and make a sharp and effective decision. So good critical thinkers are good at solving problems, which is a life skill that comes in handy in almost every situation. Okay. So it asks, why is critical thinking important for being a citizen in a democracy? And we basically talked about how important it is for you to be an informed voter when it comes time to cast a vote in a democratic election. Democracy, as I guess we all know and been reminded a couple times recently, is something that functions based on the administration of elections. And people that appointed to power, of course, assume power because of the will of the people through the democratic process. So if we wield the power as a collective to appoint people to high office, to the most powerful positions in the world, that are going to then try to serve our own interests, we would like to be able to make these decisions based on good judgment, based on rational evaluation of arguments and evidence. So good critical thinkers are wise voters, and participation, which is informed in a democracy, is necessary for the health and the stability of living in a democracy. Okay, so then, how can critical thinking benefit you in terms of making a rational life plan and self-esteem? The book talked about a couple of benefits that come from being a good critical thinker, like what's in it for me type of questions. One of those benefits is just that it makes you more capable of making effective plans, because critical thinkers are good at weighing what their goals are and what the most effective means are to the achievement of those goals and what all the little steps are going to be on the way to getting there. So if you want to be effective at making plans and having achievable success, then you'd like to sharpen some of those critical thinking skills too. People that are not good at critical thinking sometimes are like a leaf blowing in the wind, hoping that something will carry them to their desired outcome. But you really take charge of your own life when you can make clear decisions based on good evidence and direct your own course. Self-esteem, kind of the same. If you're a good critical thinker, you're not easily overwhelmed by the little problems or big problems that are bound to face all of us at some time in life. So you'd like to be the kind of person that's able to find effective solutions instead of being overwhelmed, confused, or looking for a lifeline when some unexpected or bad happens. Okay, now in critical thinking, and Devin, you've also said this, in order to be a good voter, you must be able to analyze different proposed arguments. Good. And a good critical thinker will be able to create reasonable goals and assign steps on how to achieve them. And they'll assess their capabilities too. They'll be able to determine how their capabilities figure into the achievement of their different goals. Okay, next, the 3 stages of the critical thinking process. So we can ask, what are those steps? It says that it's experience, interpretation, and analysis. But what are the meanings of those? And by the way, guys, let us not put it all on Devin. I mean, I know there's some capable and very bright students in this class, so you can showcase that by just getting engaged. But I understand that one person's willing to take the lead. It's all good, but at the same time, it's not the most equitable thing. And you look good when you answer some of the questions. Anyway, Experience. One describes what the experience was without yet trying to explain why or how it happened. Correct. You got to start somewhere, and so you have experiences, or you just at least witness that there's events happening in the world. And no, I'm not telling you to be quiet, Devin. No, you're good. I'm just trying to get everyone else to maybe jump in too, so that we have a little more, balance to the way that we are engaged in this. But it's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, if you say it in a humorous way, then I take the point. Haha. But at the same time, I do like it when everyone has some participation. He is fast with the answers, Jonah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not trying to be critical necessarily. Just trying to keep you guys engaged. So anyway, though, interpretation is the second step. And right, Con, analysis is the third step. So I'll say this. At the experience level, we say that you just have an experience, but you're not yet trying to figure out why. Like, oh, I lost my job, but I don't know why. I'm not thinking about why. The second stage, though, would be the one where you have an interpretation. So you try and figure out why or how the event did happen. And sometimes your first interpretation of an experience might be a little bit biased, clouded by emotion, or I don't know, even in some cases formed through like people could be intoxicated, depleted, sleepy. So anyways, you might want to have a second round of reconsidered judgment later after those factors subside. And that's where analysis comes in. You can come back to your interpretation, and you're willing to ask yourself, is it really the right interpretation? Or maybe is there something that's a better suited alternative explanation? Okay, so the person lost their job. They think it's because, I don't know, their boss is just mean to them, and then they think more about their performance, and perhaps now they can identify some valid reasons why they should have done something differently. Okay, not to say that you always replace your initial interpretation with a different one later, but sometimes you will, and that's why you continue to keep analysis open-ended. Then we have obstacles to critical thinking, and this is another one of the, there's a couple here at the end of chapter 1 notes that kind of condense a number of different vocabulary items into a few questions. So I'll just go through these if I can a little quickly. When it comes to obstacles to critical thinking, there's a whole range of them that were in the book that we discussed. So one was avoidance. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. It's just avoiding ideas or people that are contrary to your own views. So like only spending time with like-minded people and making an effort to like shun or, eliminate any interaction with those that don't agree or that have different views. Also just information sources, right? Like having an information diet that is sort of immune to criticism from other views. Then you have anger, showing emotional hostility instead of considering someone's point of view. So instead of considering an opposing viewpoint, you just become mad at the person who presents the information. There's no need to be mad at people, even when they hold views that you don't really agree with. I think it's fair to get mad when people do things that are not good, but just because they believe certain things, that's something that we can all just rationally debate and discuss. And worst case scenario, you have a meeting of the minds where you learn something from them, they learn something from you. So there's nothing bad that can happen. There's no need to get mad at people for having different views. It'd be better to patiently and calmly discuss our differences and see if we can at least understand each other. So next, cliche. Cliche are overused common sayings that seek to short-circuit further discussion. Stuff like, whatever, it is what it is, to each his own, agree to disagree, that's how the cookie crumbles, that's life, c'est la vie, stuff like that. Okay, c'est la vie, the French for, isn't it such as life or whatever? But, okay, denial. That's to simply deny alternative ideas instead of even considering them in any kind of depth. So like a person who's, let's say, vaccine denialist, there's no amount of evidence you could ever show them that would convince them that maybe they're wrong. They just say, nope, the evidence itself is fake. It's all a big kind of cover up. So we want to at least be open-minded enough to consider things, even that we don't initially agree with. Maybe you'll continue to not think it's true, but don't be so caught up in denial that you close off avenues for possible thought and inquiry. Okay, so next we have ignorance. This is like chosen ignorance or willful ignorance, I guess, the way the book describes it anyway. And so it's like ignorance that you're doing on purpose, like when you deliberately choose to stay uninformed on something so that you don't have to take any kind of position about it or take any actions with respect to it. Like a person says, I don't know who to vote for because I haven't looked at any of their arguments, or I don't know where I stand on this issue because I haven't studied it in any depth. Well, if the information is out there, then it's really on you that you haven't looked at it yet. Now, Paul, you're back to George Soros, what, like 100-year-old man that I guess is what, like the big villain of the world or something. It's kind of non-threatening. But yeah, no, I get the joke. It's funny. Okay, so what's next? Different types of narrow-mindedness. Oh wait, no, I've skipped a bit. There was also conformity. All right, conformity is when you simply adopt a view of the majority or what you think is popular, simply to fit in and to not be excluded somehow socially. And you really should think about things independently. Sometimes you'll agree with the consensus, sometimes you won't, but you shouldn't simply go along to get along kind of thing, especially when you harbor private doubts. So don't be guided by conventional thinking unless, of course, your judgment agrees with it. Next, struggling. That is a person who endlessly debates back and forth which action or position to take and never ever reaches the final conclusion. So it's like a person that says, I'm struggling with what to do or say, and then they actually never end up doing or saying anything. So isn't that a big waste of time? Yeah, struggling makes sense to struggle a little bit for some limited time while you're considering issues, because you can't just do analysis like that. But if you let it go on endlessly, then it becomes more of a barrier to concluding, which is the point of any analytical process. Now, the different forms of narrow-mindedness mentioned after this, which were kind of like a subcategory of these obstacles to critical thinking, as they're called in the book. So I think they just mentioned 4, or we focused on 4. Absolutism, that's not being able to stand up to authority and always assuming that they're absolutely correct, can't be challenged. Think of dualists in their earlier cognitive development. Egocentrism, that's placing yourself above all, thinking that you're the center of everything, better and smarter than other people. So if you're egocentric, you don't really have a lot of respect for others' views, particularly if they don't agree with you. Ethnocentrism, it's the unjustified belief in the inherent superiority of a person's race or culture or group. And so we don't want to practice ethnocentrism, thinking that we're literally better or worse than other people just because of arbitrary and irrelevant facts about the color of skin or whatever else. Anthropocentrism, that's saying that humanity is the only thing that really matters and everything else, non-human animals and nature, don't matter as much. And I don't know, this is in the book, and it's a reasonable thing, because we should, I think, have a fair respect, and we should be conservative with preservation of the environment and things like that. But we are superior to the animals in a lot of ways when you just think about our cognitive abilities. Nonetheless, we should have respect for the non-human parts of the world, because everything's connected. It's not like we can survive or thrive with a destroyed ecosystem and a whole bunch of species dying off. So then 2 last things from that part of the book. There's rationalization and doublethink. Rationalization is when you do something without critical thought, and then later on afterwards, you try to make it sound like it was decided based on some type of deliberative process by giving a reason that sounds rational, but you didn't have it in the beginning. So like a person buys expensive, really hype beast type of shoes that everybody wants, and somebody says to them, why'd you do that? But they did it just because they had an impulse to buy it, but now they're like, oh, well, because these shoes, if you look at the market, they have high resale value, so it's an investment. It'd be like me buying a Rolls Royce or something and being like, oh, well, these cars, they're collectibles, so it might double in value. That's, I'm playing with investment. This is a smart thing. Anyway, okay. What you've added here into the chat, I guess. Make sure I'm not losing any kind of connection. Okay, good. For a second, I thought I had a buffering issue. Technically speaking, anthropocentrism shouldn't really be a barrier to critical thinking. It's more of an opinion of morals or ethics. Noah, funny. Someone could be engaged, well-educated, etc., and a good critical thinker, but hold the opinion. But do you mean not hold the opinion? Just trying to make sure I read your comment right. Greater good for all people is sort of the word po, the syllable in the middle, anthropocentrism, but it's fair enough. Yeah, well, I don't know. Is it not the case that there is something to be said for that moral thinking? I mean, this is a moral theory that a lot of people do apply or adopt. I guess it's fair, though, to criticize. If you're a Kantian, you don't think that the maximization of happiness is the standard of morality. You think it's living according to the moral law, which in many cases actually runs contrary to maximizing happiness. For example, while we're on the topic, I guess we got to end, though. We can't go into that topic. Maybe we'll talk about it next time. Last thing, though, because this is the last word from that chapter, doublethink. It's just believing two opposite things at the same time. And that obviously puts you in a state of like cognitive paralysis. You're believing two opposite things, you're kind of playing both sides, want to have it both ways, double standards. Okay, so good, guys. Thanks, everybody. We've had, I think, a good first session. Sorry for the slight interruption in the middle, but it won't affect content. The two separate installments of this review session are both going to be posted on the channel. The first one might look a little weird for the time period after the feed goes out. It might just show like a frozen screen with typed comments in, but you can still refer to the beginning. All right then, guys. Well, have a great one. I'll be in touch with you if you need anything over the next days. But don't forget to turn in that homework tomorrow before the end of the day, if you haven't already. And I'll just be in touch with you guys through Canvas over the weekend about those grades and the extra credit that you'll get for checking the grade. So I'm going to close this meeting for now. Thanks again, everyone. Sorry for the interruption, as I said, but it seems like we got through it okay. Okay then, guys. Well, have a good one, and I'll be in touch over the weekend. See you on Tuesday.